Hello, and welcome to The Queer Gaze, a gay movie podcast dedicated to examining queer representation and issues.
We're hitting pause on our sex work and pornography theme to discuss Harry Lighton's Pillion. If you want to hear more of the discussion, including our Chili Pepper Award, please support The Queer Gaze at patreon.com/thequeergaze.
You'll also get early access to regular main feed episodes and extra content for every single episode.
And you can follow us on social media at The Queer Gaze.
Yes. All right. So, Conrad, we are back into the world of leather, but it's a slightly different take this time. Not cruising. We are kind of cruising, aren't we?
We are, although on a bike, which is quite nice. So,
right.
This is Pillion. This is adapted from Adam Mars Jones's novel Box Hill, and it, as we said, marks the feature debut of writer-director Harry Lighton, and it's arriving from the festival circuit with a reputation for being equal parts tender and transgressive. It's set in contemporary suburban southeast London, and the film follows Colin, played by Harry Melling, a socially marooned, still-at-home barbershop-quartet tenor whose beige existence is abruptly detonated when he's pulled into the orbit of Alexander Skarsgård's Ray, a statuesque, leather-clad biker with dom energy that could power the national grid. Thus begins Colin's induction into a ritualised dom sub-arrangement that rewires his sense of self, body and belonging, much to the horror of his increasingly bewildered parents. Pillion doms the deadpan British awkward rom-com with unapologetically explicit kink, asking whether surrender is liberation or self-erasure.
Okay. So you had seen this movie before because you watched it when it came to the UK, I think a little bit earlier than here in North America, and I think you were quite fond of it.
Yes, well, I was quite fond of the experience. So this showed here very early in the year, and it was shown in my local cinema. We have these secret screenings where they surprise the audience.
No.
You just know that it's an 18, you go in, you do not know what you're going to see, and all of a sudden people are watching Alexander Skarsgård choke a guy with his cock, and it was a bit, there were walkouts.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes.
There were a number of walkouts of people who were not up for that. So I chuckled quite heavily. The film itself, I was ambivalent about, actually.
Okay, interesting, because I came in here worried that we were going to have a fight because I am also slightly ambivalent about this. But I will confess, I knew what I was getting myself into because I had read the book. And to be honest, calling it a book is a bit generous. It's really more of a novella. I had read it in advance of the film coming out because I knew that this was coming. You and I have been doing a better job of tracking queer films on the film festival circuit. So we knew that this was coming and that people were very excited about it. And I found the book curiously disaffecting, like emotionally withdrawn. It's quite challenging to get a read on characters, and I was hoping that the film, by virtue of having live actors and a score and editing, was going to help me get a little bit more invested in the journey. And I'll say, I do think that the moments of comedy particularly work better here. The book is quite flat in terms of its emotional range, we'll say. I found that there were moments of lightness in the film that I quite appreciated, but people saying this movie is romantic and that they really, they fell hard for this couple, I was just like, I don't see romance here. I'm sorry.
No, me neither. Quite the opposite, in fact. I'm curious about the novella in that case, because one of the things that I read about it in terms of the differences between the
Yes.
source material, it is a first-person retrospective narrative, which one would hope would provide more insight into the characters, which we do not get here. I mean, the film doesn't even have the mechanism of giving Colin, our main character, a best friend who he confides in.
No.
He doesn't really talk to his parents about what's going on in his personal life either. So you are left with the central actors' performances, both great, it has to be said. I think they're both
great, yeah.
Yeah, there are nuances there. You can read an awful lot from what they say, what they do, and also the mise en scène, I think, is quite expressive. But they are still inscrutable. So I was hoping that the book would be slightly more expressive.
Yeah, I think that we do get a better insight into who Colin is, but so much of it is very similar to what we see on screen, where it's just a lot of confusion. He's looking for something from Ray that Ray was never willing to give him, but the parameters, the boundaries of the relationship have never been communicated. It's as if Ray just assumes that Colin knows what it means to be a sub. And he doesn't. So a large part of both texts is learning how do the logistics of a relationship like this work, and, you know, Colin trying to push against that and Ray being unwilling to do so. So that, yeah, I think you maybe feel like you're getting a bit more insight because it is a first-person narrator, but I think the film actually compensates because Melling is such a compelling actor. He's very expressive. He wears everything on his face, and it's such a great performance from him because I think, unfortunately, most people only know him from the dark text, which I'm not going to name, but yes, child actor, grown up, yay. The other big difference is the ending. So, folks, if you don't want to be spoiled, if you ever want to read the book or the novella, then, you know, avert your ears for about 30 seconds. So in the book, Ray dies. He dies off screen. Basically, there's this breakup that happens between the two of them, and then Colin just never hears from Ray again until he tracks down the members of the biker group, and they say, yeah, he died in a car accident, and that's why Ray never got back in touch with him. Whereas here in the film, it's very different. So the ending of the film and the book play extremely different.
Right. Although emotionally, I guess...
Might as well be the same.
It might as well be the same. Yeah, of course, the major talking point in this film is the power dynamic. As you say, the character does not know what it means to be in a sub-dom relationship. He is sort of learning as he goes. We have no insight into the world in the sense of you don't hear him talk about his confusion or ask questions or fight. You just watch him awkwardly find out what's wrong by doing everything that's wrong. So it just feels sort of cringe-inducingly awful the whole time, which is a difficult watch.
Yes, but I think that's also where the comedy comes in for a lot of people. So if you can tolerate cringe comedy, I think these are the parts of the film that probably work quite well for you if the romance component isn't gelling. I mean, you can say that the physical attraction between the characters is hot, typically. Like, yeah, you know, I'm sure the elderly people in your theater who walked out said, this is pornography and I'm not watching it. But for those of us who have a healthy appetite for sex, you're going to get some of that. But I think if you are going for how does this kind of relationship work, it can be a little bit frustrating that these characters just don't communicate. Like, that was my big takeaway from the film is regardless of what kind of relationship you're in, you need to be able to talk to the other person.
Yes, you really do. And it's painful that they can't.
Yeah.
In fact, that's what makes it feel abusive, because Ray will not enter into a conversation with him about what his boundaries are and what rules are. So in a lot of ways, it's quite a relief to see at the end of the movie. This is the only confirmation that you get that Colin puts himself on a dating app and he defines his boundaries, but also confirms that he does actually want this type of relationship.
Yes.
But a little bit more than he was getting, which is a relief because prior to that, you don't know if he's just being abused and if the comedy of British awkwardness is not working for you, you're just watching a guy getting abused for an hour and a half, and it's brutal, particularly because his home life is also tragic. I won't talk about why, but it's, there is a very, very sad moment in the third act that sort of plunges you into the rom-com trough of misery with the rain and everything. And so it can be sort of grim and unrelenting, actually, unless the comedy is working for you. And I have to admit, it wasn't. I didn't find it funny at all.
Oh, no. Okay, that is so interesting. I do feel like most of our listeners, I think from the kinds of comments and interactions that we've had with folks, we're probably coming down a little bit harder on this than the average folk is. It's tough, right? Because ultimately I do think I'm going to recommend this movie. It's just, it's not a personal fave of mine, but I can't argue that it's not like incredibly well directed. As you said, both of these lead performances are fantastic. I think the pacing of the film works reasonably well. It's just, there's something, it sounds so bizarre to say because I don't want to sound like the kink is the issue that I had with the movie, but I found that there was this almost barrier to entry. The film resisted my emotional investment, and then I just started to kind of resent it a little bit. Like, why are you making this so hard?
Yeah, the film is personified by Ray, almost. It's inscrutable, frustrating, and unsatisfying, which I found difficult. I mean, the central character is compelling. Some of his journey doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me. It's sort of painted in broad brushstrokes. There are things like he's living at home with his parents.
Yep.
He's in a barbershop-quartet. He does things like go to a New Year's event in the pub and then stand in the corner by himself whilst everybody else couples off and kisses. Who would do that to themselves? Anyway,
he's coded loser, right? Like, oh my God, this boy is so sheltered. He's almost infantilized. And you think, okay, this is representative of a certain kind of person, but it's incredibly specific.
It is, yeah. He's a parking enforcement officer. So he's the guy that puts the ticket under your windscreen wiper.
Yep.
So people abuse him all day. And they hate him. And this does not seem to be something that he is particularly happy about or comfortable with until he's being abused in a relationship, at which point he seems to be either oblivious or fine with it. And I don't quite get the math of that.
Yeah. I think part of it is that we're seeing a character who is so used to being mistreated, verging on abuse, if you want to say that. But then he gets the kind of silver lining of a good dicking from a really hot guy. And he says, okay, well, if I'm already getting this, here's at least the perk.
Yeah, see, this is the problem that I have. It is that first moment when they stand in an alleyway together and Ray, Alexander Skarsgård, in biking leathers, looking
dashing,
just epic. I mean, the mythic almost.
Truly, you never realize how tall he is until he stands next to Harry Melling, who I don't think is a short person, but you just
not at all.
You realize, oh wow, Alexander Skarsgård is basically a mountain of a man. You know, the kind of bridesmaid joke with Melissa McCarthy where she says, "I'm going to climb that man." Applies here.
It really does. And he says to him, what am I going to do with you? Which sounds kind of tender, and his response is anything you like, really. So kind of he's giving consent permission. But on the other hand, it does kind of look like, you know, those sort of social media posts where you say, I would really like Alexander Skarsgård to wreck my bussy. You know, that sort of thing. And so how much of it, choke me, exactly, how much of it is just that he is overwhelmed by this Scandinavian god?
Yeah, because look at who he's surrounded by, like regular fuggos. Clearly this is a guy who isn't getting a lot of dick. And he's like, wait, all of a sudden this statuesque man, this Swedish giant wants to choke me with his penis? Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that I was a little bit wondering about in terms of the book, because I think the book does not have this figure as a character. I think the book, as from what I've read, analyzes Ray a little bit more, whereas this just objectifies him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll confess I can't remember it well enough
Mm.
to offer a detailed explanation. From what I remember, there is a difference in terms of their aesthetic and social value. Like, you're very much given this perception that this main character of Colin doesn't feel super great about himself, and this other person is definitely, I'm a 6 and he's a 10 kind of deal. But yeah, I'm sorry, I can't elaborate anymore because I just don't recall.
No. And in the book, I believe Colin is 19.
I think the age discrepancy is a little bit more significant. Yeah, because the meet cute, if we can call it that, is even different where he's just out for a walk. Like his parents have stayed at the pub and he goes for a walk and he just sees Ray sitting there in his leathers and he kind of like just goes over, takes out his dick and has his way with
Oh.
it.
Oh, okay. Wow,
Yeah.
that's brave. Okay. Well, yeah, so the power dynamic, obviously, I think in aging up, Colin, you've avoided one of the most
Yeah.
potentially troubling things when you depict it on screen,
Yeah.
which, yeah, probably sensible because otherwise, I just visually, I don't think you could get past it. It's sort of the problem that we had with Call Me By Your Name when we looked at it, and that, yeah, it
It
doesn't
feels
quite
sick.
sit well.
Yeah. Yeah. But it maybe also helps to explain a little bit. I think it makes Colin a slightly less pathetic figure because in the film you think, what is this grown ass man still doing, living with his parents, singing in this really sad barbershop quartet? Which, no offense to people if you're singing in a barbershop quartet, it's just, it's very much used in the film as, oh, wow, this guy has nothing going on in his life.
Yes. How did you feel about the depiction of the biker gang?
Um, Again, kind of ambivalent. I was excited to see Jake Shears from the Scissor Sisters in there, but it feels a little sort of like a bohemian sex cult. Like when they go away for this camping retreat for Colin's birthday, and it's just assless chaps spread out over the picnic table so that we can ram people. Like that scene is almost page for page from the book, but it's still just, it feels quite a bit more salacious in the film.
Yeah, this is the thing that I couldn't quite get to grips with. I've read various reviews that suggest that this is a warmer depiction of that group than perhaps it would have been treated in sort of a text if it'd been done sort of 10 years ago or 20 years ago or whatever. It doesn't other them that much. But
Right.
I'm not sure how true that whether you can hold that in the same space as making a British awkwardness comedy where surely the thing that you're laughing at is, the contrast with sort of middle class domesticity. You sort of look at it and go, oh, titter, this is a bit risque. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it'd be the same thing if we were talking about something like Key Parties in The Ice Storm or something like that. It's just, this is very off the beaten path of respectable, conservative heteronormativity. So it's tough to critique it as well. I mean, I don't identify as a member of a biker gang. I've never spent any time with them, but apparently Harry Lighton did go out and hang out with them so that he could have a bit more of their lived experience. They consulted on the film. So many of the bikers we see are actually real life members of that group. So I have to assume that there is a bit of a stamp of authenticity here.
Yeah, that was my assumption as well. It seems like less of an outside in view, but still, it is paired with the comedy aspects, which kind of undermine it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, why don't we wrap things up here on the main feed and transition over to Patreon? Because I want to hear about your thoughts about the parents, because I do think some of the most powerful scenes, or at least some of the most combustible scenes, come out from the interactions between Ray and Colin's parents. But folks, if you want to join us, that's over on patreon.com/thequeergaze. If you don't want to throw us a few coins, you don't want to hear that part of the discussion, then I can tell you we will be back in a couple of weeks to wrap up our sex work and pornography theme. So we have one more title. We're going to travel back to France for the 2018 film Sauvage. But if you have big, strong feelings about Pillion, you can always shoot us a message at thequeergayshow@gmail.com or on social media at thequeergays.
Indeed.